Thank you very much. Coming up, when James Comey within his rights to release his own memos about the president? James Comey revealed today he asked a friend, a professor at Columbia Law School, to share the contents of his Trump memo with a reporter. Let's discuss this now with my legal experts. Adam Goldberg is here. He's a former special associate counsel to President Clinton. Philip Lacavara is a counsel to Watergate Special Prosecutor Archibald Cox, or at least was, and Leon Jaworski. And CNN contributor John Dean, the former Nixon White House counsel and author of Conservatives Without Conscience, and Ambassador James Woolsey, former director of the CIA. It's got to be deja vu for you two gentlemen.
It's always nice to be back together.
Was Comey within his rights, John Dean, to share the contents of that memo with his friend?
I think he was. We have no Official Secrets Act in this country. He's a private citizen. It was a memo that he made of a conversation that might have been considered a government document, might have also been considered a diary document, so it's hard to tell. I don't think he broke any law.
What he did was very savvy on most accounts, because he said he did it because he wanted a special prosecutor. So, Philip, I have to ask you this. Comey says he did it in response to the president's tweet. Here's a tweet on May 12th, which said, James Comey better hope that there are no tapes of our conversations before he starts leaking to the press. Was leaking the memo the only way to get the special prosecutor?
I think it was one of the techniques that he thought he was going to have to use, because he didn't have confidence at that point in the Deputy Attorney General, who had been the person who seemed to have been responsible for providing the grounds for sacking him, although it turned out later that the president admitted that the cover story was false. So I don't think Comey saw he had any other route within the normal channels to get a special counsel appointed.
Adam, legal or illegal?
Legal. I think, the big problem with, big interesting thing about that was Mark Kasowitz in his statement afterward tried to suggest that actually Comey lied in his testimony and got the timeline wrong. But it was Mark Kasowitz who got the timeline wrong, and Comey got it right. I think it was a bad first day of crisis management for Mark Kasowitz.
Let's listen to Kasowitz, and then we'll discuss.
Today, Mr. Comey admitted that he unilaterally and surreptitiously made unauthorized disclosures to the press of privileged communications with the president. The leaks of this privileged information began no later than March 2017, when friends of Mr. Comey have stated that he disclosed to them the conversations that he had with the president during their January 27th, 2017 dinner and February 14th, 2017 White House meeting. Today, Mr. Comey admitted that he leaked to friends of his purported memos of those privileged communications, one of which he testified was classified. Mr. Comey also testified that immediately after he was terminated, he authorized his friends to leak the contents of those memos to the press in order to, in Mr. Comey's words, quote, prompt the appointment of a special counsel. We will leave it to the appropriate authorities to determine whether these leaks should be investigated, along with all the others that are being investigated.
So, Jim Woolsey, the question is, should the leak be investigated? But, to the point here made earlier by Adam, he actually did get the timeline wrong. He's pointing to the fact that the New York Times story detailing the Trump-Comey dinner and Trump's demand for loyalty appeared on May 11th. The day before the tweet, but the first New York Times story that cited a memo, not just sources, it appeared on March 16th. So he got the timeline wrong. Do you think that should be investigated, though?
I agree with my three colleagues. I don't think this is a legal problem for him. But he's beginning to look like he works for the Federal Bureau of Public Information, that for the instead of the FBI, the wrong initials. He turned loose the memo about Hillary. He changed direction on that back several months ago. He was making public statements. He now wants to leak 5 documents, maybe 1 classified. I heard that perhaps that's not classified. It was on a classified computer, but it's just kind of one thing after another in terms of informing the public, and that's not normally what the Bureau does or thinks it does, and the reason it has such confidence with the people of the United States is that it doesn't seem to be on a PR twing, and it looks very much like Comey is.
Philip, were those conversations privileged?
No. The president, first of all, didn't assert any executive privilege, and having argued the Nixon tapes case, which dealt with the issue of executive privilege, I think I can say confidently the conversations that Comey and the president had would not have been covered by executive privilege in any event.
Do you think that, as he's saying, you said he's you said a minister of information? Is that
It's Federal Bureau of Public Information.
public information? Do you agree with that assessment of James Comey that he's?
No.
I don't think so. I think what you have here is a situation where he's just been fired and he's been accused of all sorts of misconduct or lack of effective leadership, and he's exercising what I would consider to be a fairly responsible right of reply. Mm-hmm. He's entitled to defend himself in the court that the president chose to make this battle in, and that was the court of public opinion.
You said that everything the president says, John, you said it's not privileged.
No, it's not, unless it's classified or does fall within the area of executive privilege, which is pretty narrow. It's deliberative decision-making. Sometimes it'll apply, but it certainly isn't a blanket privilege that everything he says is ex cathedra and immediately gets a privilege connected with it.
I would just add that Comey started this before this last round. He started with Hillary, going back and forth public statements on her. So it's not the way the Bureau ought to operate. Maybe in some individual circumstances, he has to take a step. I'm not saying he did anything criminal. But
of course, at the time he did this, he had already been fired, so he wasn't in the Bureau any longer. That may or may not change your point, but his view was this was the only mechanism that was available to him to make sure that what actually happened came out and was part of the official record.
Let's take it back to his extraordinary opening statement for a former FBI director, saying that the president defamed him. So if he was defamed,
And
we
the
haven't
Bureau.
had a president do that before, where it's criticized and belittled him, especially to the Russians.
Yeah, I want to talk to this about hope. This one specific exchange, it deals with the fact that the president said, I hope you can let this go, instead of ordering the investigation to Comey to stand down. Watch this.
He did not direct you to let it go.
Not in his words, no.
He did not order you to let it go.
Again, those words are not an order.
No. Do you know of any case where a person has been charged for obstruction of justice, or for that matter, any other criminal offense, where they said or thought they hoped for an outcome?
I don't know well enough to answer.
So the New York Times, Adam Liptek retweeted out an interesting point for this case. He says, for instance, the Eighth Circuit affirmed an obstruction of justice enhancement based partly on an I hope statement. And I've been reading it here, and if you can see it there, it's up on the screen, where someone was saying, I hope that you don't tell anybody about the knife, because it would certainly incriminate me. So what do you make of this? Can it be based on hope?
I would multiply that by about 100 when you're in the Oval Office and the president says something. I can recall countless things where Nixon said he didn't give a direct order, but he rather indirectly suggested what he wanted staff to do. Mm-hmm. And staff takes that as, click your heels, salute, and go out and get it done.
You put that fact that Comey, I think, eloquently testified to today. What the president says he hopes a subordinate does is more than just an idle speculation. But it's all irrelevant under the obstruction of justice statute, which doesn't require an order to do something improper. It only punishes the endeavor, that is, the attempt to influence or impede an investigation. And I think Comey said he quite reasonably understood that what the president was trying to do was to influence or impede his investigation by urging him to let Flynn go.
In this one, which was obstruction of justice, it says, I hope and pray to God that you do not say anything about a weapon when you were in Iowa, because it will make it worse on me, and even if they promise not to prosecute you.
That's exactly right. That's the attempt to influence or impede an investigation or a witness's testimony.
This is like the Godfather saying, I made him an offer he couldn't refuse. It wasn't really an offer. just like this wasn't really, I hope, it was a directive.
And that's why Comey said he believed that he was being ordered to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it. And we come right back what James Comey told senators behind closed doors after his blockbuster testimony today.